afternoon and welcome. I'm Steve Roberts with the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce. I want to welcome you to this afternoon's Business Academy, another in the series. This one is titled Exploring Data Centers. We're pleased to be able to welcome Chris Morris. Chris is the director of the Data Economy Office of the West Virginia Division of Economic Development. Sitting next to me is Kaylin George, also with the West Virginia Chamber. Kaylin, I want to thank you for your having set up not only this Business Academy, but having come up with the idea of using a series like a Business Academy to help keep Chamber members and others around West Virginia informed about issues of interest and provide opportunities for comment and input. Chris, it's great to have you with us. Thank you so much for offering to do this conversation today. We're all interested in the topic of data centers. I'm not going to say too much about data centers because I know you're going to cover the topic thoroughly. I do want people who have joined this Business Academy to be aware that they can have their question heard by leaving it in the chat or the Q&A box. So we will have a presentation from Chris, and then as time allows, we will get to either some or all of the questions that you might put in the chat or Q&A box. So with that, again, thank you, Chris Morris. I'm going to turn the program over to you. Kaylin George and I will be here, and we will be monitoring questions so that we can try to get those questions to Chris so that he can give you a timely response. With that, Chris, welcome. Thank you for doing this.
Well, Steve and Kaylin, thank you so much for the invitation. And can you hear me okay?
We can hear well.
Okay, yep. Great. I do appreciate the opportunity, and I can tell you, I appreciate all the work that the Chamber does. I've had the opportunity to be involved with the State Chamber over the years as a member, and certainly you do a wonderful job advocating on behalf of the businesses of the state. And so I appreciate that and all your work and for having me on here today. I thought I'd start off by taking a few minutes just to give, I know that there's a lot of folks on here that are friends. And so bear with me for a minute. For those of you that don't know me, I thought I'd give you a minute or two of my background and kind of my thinking why I even would take this job. And so I did spend the last 15 years working for a local internet service provider in West Virginia, CityNet, and spent 15 years there, basically just trying to get broadband into rural parts of the state that otherwise wouldn't have ever received it. And basically, it was a very collaborative approach to my job. Many of these areas didn't have service because of the economics involved did not work. They required subsidies. And so I worked with local governments to identify potential project areas and then worked with state and federal officials to identify funding sources that matched the needs. So prior to that, I worked for American Water. And again, a very collaborative approach there. An example, I worked on some legislation that assisted low-income households with rate relief. And had been attempted several times unsuccessfully, but reached out to the PSC and worked with the PSC as well as a consumer advocate organization and successfully was able to seek passage of the legislation. And then prior to that, I spent a number of years in the Department of Revenue, just under 10 years, in a variety of roles. And another example of collaboration, I spent, in fact, a lot of folks on this call did the same thing. It was on the All for One, the constitutional amendment for tax increment financing. You know, a lot of folks did not think that we would be successful in getting that passed. And it was a great effort, again, by many folks on here with the business community, working with labor and others, leaders from across the state to educate people about the benefits of tax increment financing. And so the reason I tell you those things is because I want to approach this job in the same way. I very much view this role as being a collaborative approach between the state, the private sector, landowners, local governments, state government, and federal agencies as well. And so I want to bring that same approach to this role. So I will tell you, I was happy in my old job. I wasn't looking for a new opportunity, and I was actually asked about this position and politely declined and gave them some great names of people that would be better than me in this role. But eventually they came back to me and asked me about it, and I always ask myself the same couple of questions about a job opportunity. And the first question I always ask is the outcome desirable? Will I feel good about this job? And so, as I was thinking through this opportunity, it's kind of a funny, quick story. But one of my daughters actually said to me, "Dad, I don't know about that. I saw on TikTok that every time someone does a Google search, that it's a flushing a gallon of water down the drain." And I started thinking through, the statement a little bit and laughed a little bit. It's kind of cute, but there are a lot of people that don't understand data centers. They don't understand the services that are provided, and so I started thinking about, can I feel good about this job? If I can actually be successful, will I feel good about it? So I responded to my daughter and said, "Let me ask you a question. You just said you learned about this on TikTok. You realize that that's provided to you over a data center." And then I started thinking about the other aspects of her life with her. She takes several classes in person and several online classes. Those classes are provided to her via a data center. She has a standing monthly doctor appointment in Charleston, although she doesn't live in town. Those are virtual meetings, data center. I am very familiar with putting money in her bank account via online banking, as well as Apple Pay and Venmo, all courtesy of data centers. How we watch our movies or stream music, that's all, again, data center driven. How we communicate, every email, text, video call. How we stay informed through how we watch our news, whether we gain information through social media or other mediums. Just the conveniences of life, Uber, Lyft, ordering groceries or other goods online, making 911 calls, paying for gas at the pump. All these things are as a result of data centers. And so I started thinking about, well, these aren't going away. And, historically, I grew up in West Virginia, and I remember people talking about keeping wealth here. And so I looked at this as an opportunity to say, look, let's have this investment come here and keep that wealth here in the state. And so the next question I began to think through was, can I be successful in this role? And at first, that was really one of the reasons I didn't want to take the job, because I wasn't sure I could be successful. And then I started thinking about it. My background, obviously, the first thing that jumped out at me was fiber connectivity, because that was my background. Excuse me. And I know there's challenges in West Virginia with regard to connectivity and network density. Our proximity to major fiber routes and internet exchange points. We don't have these in West Virginia, and so that was one of my concerns. What I learned as I started evaluating this opportunity is that certainly that is a factor, but it is a small factor in that decision. And it's as far as the cost goes, it is something that can be built out in relation to a project. The other things that these companies are looking for, and by far the number one issue, is access to power. Power availability and power reliability is the number one, and I mean, it is the long pole in the tent. And so these companies are looking for, one of the companies that I talked to, a hyperscale company that we all know, said to me, look, you find a gigawatt of power and we'll make as many landowners happy as we have to. And so that access to power, that timeliness of power, the reliability of power, and the scalability of power. So what's available at that site today, what's available at that site in 2 months or 24 months, or what's available at that site in 5 years. And I wasn't as familiar with the power side of things, so I wasn't sure about whether or not we could be successful in that area. Certainly, I've seen over time that through the passage of House Bill 2014, and certainly Governor Morrisey announced his 50 by 50 power plan last year that triples the amount of energy produced in West Virginia, which relies on all forms of power. Certainly, we have the ability to power these facilities. So that is the number one factor that these companies are looking for. I kind of mentioned land. Obviously, they're looking for land, for sufficient land area for initial construction, but they also like to account for and plan for future growth for campuses as well. I already went through fiber connectivity. They are looking for regulatory and tax landscape, favorable local and state tax incentives, reasonable zoning, and efficient permitting processes. I'll go into how House Bill 2014 touched on that a little bit later. But I can tell you from my role in the Department of Revenue years ago, our tax climate is I would consider very business friendly as already. And so they also look at a talent pool. Do we have access to skilled workers here for operation and management of these facilities? And so they're also looking for areas that will welcome them. There have been some press that is less than favorable on some projects, and we can get into that potentially later if there's questions about those. But these companies pay attention to that. They want to go where people want them, and so we all want to be wanted. And so I think part of the important thing that we're doing today is trying to overcome and educate folks on the benefits, plan for any challenges, and then be successful in bringing some of these projects here. I will say that one of the things that House Bill 2014 did accomplish is, and I'll give kudos to Governor Morrisey and the legislature, was the passage of House Bill 2014. Again, it was not on my radar, had nothing to do with me. But I will say that it has gotten the attention of the industry, and we have a lot of opportunities because of that passage. I think it communicates a desire and a willingness to bring these companies here, a desire for the investment here. And so I love the fact that we have a plan. A lot of people have a hope. We all want to hope for a project. We all want to hope for a better future. We all want hope for a job for our kids, but this is actually a plan, and I believe it's achievable. And so I do want to spend a couple minutes focusing on House Bill 2014 and what it achieved. And so we'll transition there now. So House Bill 2014 did a number of things, and I'll start with the creation of this position. Obviously, I think Steve mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, there wasn't a data economy office. There wasn't a data center liaison. And so that legislation created this position and created this office. And I will tell you, that has been received very well by the industry. I can tell you that they very much prefer a single point of contact. These people are extraordinarily busy. The people that are making these decisions, frankly, there aren't a whole lot of these people making multi-billions of dollars of decisions. And so they have every state, every jurisdiction across the country that are either generally for them and want them or against them. There's not a lot of middle of the road there. And so they have very much pointed out to me that they appreciate that we have a single point of contact. And I've taken the position that I will be respectful of these companies. If I get on a call with someone and they have a authority to spend $35 billion, I recognize how busy they are. And I told them, you tell me what you want, you tell me what you need. I won't call you back until I find it. And so the creation of this office and the creation of this position were very well received by the industry. Let's see. When I first got to the office, there were basically, I felt like 100 top priorities, which makes life tough because if you have all top priorities, then you have no top priorities. But one of the first things I wanted to do was to actually tour a hyperscale facility. So I went to Ashburn, Virginia, and did that. And so, I was familiar. We have data centers in West Virginia. This is not a novel concept. We have a number of them here. They're not hyperscale facilities, but we have data centers here. And so I did want to, if I'm trying to recruit this type of investment, the first thing I needed to do, or one of the first things I needed to do, was actually experience one and see if what the hubbub was about. And so when I got there, I went in and I toured a facility that was honestly very secure. It was a large building, and but from the outside, not much to write home about. It was not visibly um, ascertainable to be able to determine it was a data center. It was just a big building. And so, I went through my tour, and certainly there were a lot of racks, a lot of equipment. There were some rooms that were kind of noisy, but from the exterior of the facility, it was not noticeable. There wasn't a lot of noise outside of the building. There weren't lasers shooting out of this out of the building. It was just a giant building. And so, there are a lot of folks that have concerns about how the exterior of a building appears and the impact it can have on a community. And certainly, I think the companies that we're talking to are aware of that, and they go to great lengths to create a plan and implement a plan that is lacks disturbance to any surrounding buildings or neighborhoods or anything like that. In fact, that's very much on their radar as far as how they look at sites as well. So what else did I do once I got this job? Didn't have a budget, so got a budget request in, and that's going through the legislative process now. Hopefully, that'll be approved, and once that is, I will begin hiring additional folks. Right now, the data economy office is an office of one, and so that being said, there are a number of people in this department that are exceptionally knowledgeable and helpful. There were projects that had started prior to House Bill 2014, data center projects that were already in the works. But I will say, so there are folks both in the Division of Economic Development as well as the Office of Energy that have great relationships with a number of these companies, and also a lot of knowledge with regard to the sites across the state. And so, although it's an office of one, I've been able to function much better than that because of a reliance on their expertise and professionalism of the folks within the department. Another, obviously, a something that I had to focus on is just recruitment and just handling a large volume of interest. There are a lot of real opportunities, but there are also a lot of speculative opportunities out there. There are a lot of folks that are, that own a big piece of land that think they can develop a data center. It's really, really much more difficult than that. And so just trying to figure out how to handle the volume of interest has been a challenge, as well as determining methods for, determining if a project is real or not. I think most of you are aware site development is a big issue in the state. Just trying to have an inventory of sites that are attractive to projects. Hyperscale projects, the larger projects require obviously larger tracts of land. And when we talk to the biggest of the big companies, they are looking for power availability of 200 to 250 megawatts of power within 24 months, and then 1,000 acres, and then have scalability of power up to a gigawatt within, the faster the better. So those are the things that they're looking for, and so we're trying to make sure that we have ample opportunity kind of lined up for them as they consider West Virginia as an option. Just communicating with people. I see tremendous value in this meeting today. I think that there's been a lot of misinformation about data centers. I think that there's some pushback, and people who are opposed to data centers that don't know even why they're opposed to them. They just are. And so being able to communicate with folks and explain that, look, we're trying to work with locals on identifying areas where there's a desire to have projects and desire for investment. And I can tell you, there are a lot of legislative leaders, there are a lot of county commissioners, there are a lot of folks that do want this investment in their district, in their counties, or in their areas. And there have been some that have come and said, "Hey, look, if you have a project that's looking for a site, not here, not my backyard," and that's good to know. Again, it's not. I don't think it's my role to ramrod a project to a specific site. These are business transactions, so we're looking for willing sellers and a buyer with the resources to come in, invest, and be successful in rolling out a substantial project. And so, but certainly, as I've gone through this, just communicating and finding opportunities like today has been a challenge. And sometimes you get so busy with everything else, that's an area that lacks. And I can be honest, that is an area that I think we could improve on drastically. Including in that is the development and improvement of our website. We have great folks here at the department that work on that, and I've got to focus some more of my time on getting more information out there on the website, so the projects, it's not a pop test or not a pop quiz. We want people to know these are the things that you have to do. These are the requirements, both in the code and through the legislative rule, that you have to meet in order to receive this designation. And that way, when they apply, they're more likely to be successful. And so that's an area that I need to shift some focus in as well. Another part of the role of this office is just coordination with all kinds of folks. I've called it basically a concierge to these projects, and so certainly there's a number of state agencies that have permitting oversight. There's federal permitting processes that often you have to go through, and so reaching out to state agencies is fairly simple as a sister agency at the state level. Certainly, to the extent that we are working with federal agencies, I think it does benefit projects when the state does reach out and say, "Hey, this is an important project to the state. Could you at least make sure it doesn't get lost on your desk?" And so certainly doing those things, and then one of the areas that I really have to figure out is on how we interface with local governments. Obviously, House Bill 2014, one of the things it does is preempts local zoning and permitting. And, if you look across the 55 counties in the state, there are a lot of different ways, whether you're in a municipality or not, or what county you're in, there are different rules for, every location. And so we have to figure out how to interface with those local governments and what does that preemption look like. And so I can tell you from interfacing with the larger companies, I think that the certainty and of the timing is positive with regard to that aspect of 2014, but they also want to be well received. And so these companies want to come in and sit down with the counties and county planners and sit down and go over their plans and present their plans to those individuals and get feedback and ask them, are there ways we can improve our project? And so just, as projects come in and they're approved, one of the roles will be to actually interface with those companies, with the local government as well. Certainly, we're also focused on the legislative rules, as I mentioned earlier, as well as any bills. I'm not this administration is not looking for any legislative changes to House Bill 2014 that passed last year or those sections. And so certainly I know there are a number of them out there, but they're not being sought by this office. Certainly we want to see the legislative rules be complete and be able to function under those. And then I already mentioned the intake form and trying to develop the process of, it's my desire that if a project comes in and identifies that it has at least 90 megawatts of critical IT load, and it fits the definition of a high impact data center, that they start with the Department of Commerce. They come in, they present their information, they receive their designation before they start going down the road of getting any other permits. I think that number one, they are required by law to notify the Department of Commerce within 30 days of knowing that they're eligible. But also, just from a practical standpoint, being able to coordinate with the other agencies and not tie up resources. I don't want every every project that thinks they're a project that may not be approved to go to DEP and seek a permit when they may not even get there. And so we're encouraging and asking for projects to start with the Department of Commerce. So we're laying that that process out. Other things that the House Bill 2014 established. Let's see, they established obviously the high impact data center program, which again I mentioned just a moment ago. You have to have at least 90 megawatts of critical IT load in order to be qualified. That doesn't mean that we don't want smaller data centers here. Certainly, I think we don't need to swing for the fences every time and try to hit home runs every time we're at bat. There's nothing wrong with singles, doubles, and triples. And so that just means that the provisions of House Bill 2014 do not apply unless you reach that or plan to reach that threshold at the completion of your project. So if phase one is 50 megawatts of power of critical IT load, and then it grows, but by the final phase of the project, it is at least 90 megawatts of critical IT load, it would then be considered a high impact data center, and those provisions would then apply to that project. Other considerations that are outlined in the rules and that are being considered by the department as applications come in. We need sufficient economic, financial, and engineering information concerning the project. We need detail about the size and scope and the nature of the project. We need approximate proposed acreage and the location, the estimated capital investment. Going back to the power, if it's on the grid, project needs to indicate whether they've requested a power study from the regulated utility. And if so, any information that the utility has provided back with regard to the first delivery date of service. We need an estimated project completion date, major project milestones. And then this was inserted the other day in the Rules Committee, and I think it was a positive addition, was information regarding the proximity to schools, churches, residences, businesses listed on the National Register of Historic Places and National Historic Landmarks as designated by the National Park Service, and the proposed actions, if any, by the petitioner to offset the potential effects that the high impact data center or microgrid project might have on those locations. And so that is part of our evaluation process as we receive those as well. Once we have companies that have already submitted petitions that were deemed incomplete. And so we've gone back and asked for additional information. Once we have an application that is considered complete, the Secretary of Commerce has 14 days to then notify the data center applicant if they are approved for that or not. I've already mentioned the preemption of the county or municipal zoning, noise, view shed, lighting, or land use ordinances, restrictions, limitations, or approvals. There's also obviously, I think, one of the things that was a point of interest during the process was the use of the revenue. And so where that ended, I think the beginning, and I'll be honest with you, I think they started with there was going to be no money that went to the county where the project was housed, and there was tremendous pushback, which I understand completely. And where they landed was that 50% of the increment that's generated by these projects goes to the state, and it goes into a fund for a personal income tax reduction fund. And then 30% of the increment goes to the county where the project is located. 10% of the increment goes to all counties on a per capita basis. And then 5% goes into a economic enhancement grant fund that goes towards site development and is administered by the Water Development Authority. And 5% of the funding goes to the Electric Grid Stabilization and Security Fund. And so, that's the way that the funds will be used. I will say that when I've had talks with, I spoke at the County Commissioners Association meeting not too long ago, and what I pointed out there is, number one, a lot of these projects wouldn't be here but for this legislation, and 30% of the numbers that we're talking about can be humongous uh, revenue opportunities for these counties. I mean, they are literally millions and millions and millions of dollars. It could be tens of millions of dollars or more in those counties every year. And so these are tremendous opportunities for those counties. And then also the counties that don't have projects also benefit as well. The bill also created the Certified Microgrid Development Program, looking at the power generation. It's a lot more complex than the high impact data center. And frankly, I'm not going to get into that too much today. If there's a desire to have a follow up conversation on the microgrid portion of the bill, we can certainly arrange for that at a later date. As I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, I want to collaborate. I want to work with local leaders, business leaders, with county commissions, with anybody who's involved in these projects. I do think that these projects can be transformational to our state, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on today to have this conversation. And I do want to leave some time for questions, but I hope this information's been helpful, and I look forward to having further conversations going forward.
Great, Chris. Thank you very much for that overview of the work that your office is doing and some of the components of House Bill 2014 from last year's legislative session. So thank you for that. There are a couple of questions in the queue. I will remind those who are on the call that if you have a question, you can enter it into the chat or into Q&A. And in no particular order, let me just say that we've got a question that relates to water usage and environmental concerns. And the question generally says, what can be done to assuage concerns that might exist around environmental and water usage issues? Another question simply asks, how can people in industry be helpful to attracting data centers? Another question asks whether there is additional legislation contemplated related to data centers this year. And finally, we have a question that essentially says or asks, how can communities' interest be gauged in whether it is open to attracting a data center? So I wouldn't expect you to take on all four of those at once. Maybe I'll just start from the first question we got, which was the question on, can you address the how environmental issues can be, how people can become more comfortable with water usage and the environmental issues that may surround some data centers?
I appreciate that question. I actually have a couple of thoughts about that. I will say, as I pointed out with regard to collaboration, I have taken the opportunity over the last several weeks to spend time meeting with a number of our environmental groups across the state. I've met with representatives from the West Virginia River Coalition, as well as the Nature Conservancy, and a number of groups. And as a result, I actually included, and I'm kind of still in the process of finalizing this process, but I've included language in the intake form. And as part of the rule, I asked our council if I was covered or if I needed to actually have a rule change. But because in the code we're allowed to ask for engineering information about the project, we're specifically going to ask for water usage and allow ask for DEP to then review that as part of our review process, just to make sure that we have a good understanding of the water usage for a project. Now, I will say a couple things. Historically, I think that water usage was a major concern. And just like the first computer was as big as the room I'm in and was less powerful than my phone, smart people figure out ways to be efficient. And so these are smart people, and it's in their best interest to be efficient. They save money when they save water. They save money when they save power, and don't use as much power. And so they have made tremendous strides on water usage. Certainly, it's still something that I think can continue to be improved. But I spoke with a hyperscaler not too long about this topic, and they said they have switched to it's called a closed loop cooling system. And after their cooling system is filled, they said their monthly use of water is about the same as an average size restaurant. And so, again, there's been drastic improvements there. One of the things that I've asked legislators, is I'm not a big supporter of having disparate treatment of industries. And so if you're going to look at users of large volumes of water, if it's 300,000 gallons a month, then a policy should apply to anyone that uses that amount of water, regardless of whether it's a data center or a golf course or any other entity. And so, I think that, in fact, a lot of the folks I've talked to are very comfortable in the strides they're making. And I think they're going to continue to be even more efficient with their water use going forward. But I do want to include that as part of the process that we evaluate. And I want that. One of the challenges we have is that it's necessary that everything that's submitted as an application is confidential, as you can see why when people are investing billions of dollars. At the point they become public is when they're approved. And so in that approval, we want to convey that one of the things that we've looked at is their ability to power the project, their water usage. Is it reasonable? And we've had DEP review that water usage plan.
Chris, thank you. Maybe again, just trying to hit these a little bit in order. We did have a question on whether legislation is contemplated for this legislative session.
I've seen some bills. We're not seeking legislation this session. I know one bill that I read about the other day was for tax cuts for data centers. I can tell you in every conversation that I've had with a hyperscaler, they are not asking for tax cuts. In fact, they're not asking for any financial assistance from the state whatsoever. They are I don't see us supporting any kind of tax breaks for data centers at all. And I'm not aware of any other legislative changes that we're asking for or need at this time. Just like when I was in my old life, I always like to have the legislature act and then give us a chance to move forward and implement. And then if we needed stuff, we'd come back and ask them again. And so that's kind of the approach that I'm taking with this at this time.
Thank you, Chris. We did have a question on how one goes about determining a community's interest. I think you partially answered that in your just a moment ago, but I don't know if you want to, if you would be able to expand on that or not.
Sure, I'm happy to. I think that the department, the Division of Economic Development, does a lot of work on site development. And I know that there's a lot of folks on the local level that do a lot of work on that as well. So we're tossing around ideas about even potentially doing an RFI or another solicitation of information that would not be onerous to anyone locally, but simply indicate that, hey, we have a site, number one, that we think makes sense. Number two, we've maybe even had conversations with the regulated utility about availability, at least conceptually, of power to that site. And there's community support. I mean, that's one thing that we don't know always. I'd rather ask local people, hey, is this going to be well received or not? Because, you can see the impact that pushback has had in other projects in other states. I saw not too long ago a project in Wisconsin that was a $15 billion project that the developer just walked away from, and I called him and said, hey, come here. So we want to make sure. I'm open to suggestion. Certainly anyone on this call that has ideas for projects and sites, not just for data centers, but also for microgrid solutions. make sure we share my contact information. But I do want to have a formal yet simple process that allows feedback from local leaders.
Chris, it's also possible that we won't get to all the questions in the time we have allocated. Is there, how would you like for people to contact you? Do you want them to contact us and we can forward questions to you? We have saved the questions that have come in, so we can forward those to you if you would like.
Sure. You can do that or share my email
Okay.
address. It's
All right.
it's a state email address, and I'll be glad to. If I don't know the answer, it may take me a little time to get you an answer, but I'm happy to try to get back to you as quickly as possible.
The next question that I saw and that I think we have time to get to is does the Department of Commerce, do you have sites that are already identified as being places that are suitable or lend themselves to being the right places for data centers?
Yeah, I think so. Couple thoughts on that. First, there were some projects um, that started prior to House Bill 2014. Some of which are going well, some of which have had some pushback, and so there are a number of projects that are moving forward. I can tell you that there have not been any HIDC designations granted as of today. I do think that it will be in a matter of weeks that we'll see some approvals. But I think that there are a number of sites, yes, that especially that the Division of Economic Development's site team are very aware of, and that's one of the. We have two people in particular that are excellent that focus on data center sites, and they spend a tremendous amount of time taking prospective projects to those sites. And so, they're on, a lot of them are on the state's website. I'm sure, I don't know that all of them are, but we have identified a number of very attractive sites.
I think we've got time for yet another question, which, and I'm paraphrasing on many of these questions. So if you're the questioner, forgive me if I'm missing the point of your question, but I'm trying to get to the point of the question. Um, we've we've had a question related to, are there spinoff jobs, spinoff industries that tend to follow data centers?
Um, so a couple things about the jobs. I'll say this: data centers are not known as enormous job creators as far as the full time, long term jobs. I will say, hyperscale projects um, have tremendous construction jobs. I talked to a company that employed, they said that on the average day, and this lasted for years, they had 2,000 electricians on site at that site for more than a couple of years. And so the construction jobs are enormous. Then the jobs that actually are employed by these companies, they're a smaller number. So there's one project that I'm working on right now. When it's complete, they're looking at a couple hundred jobs, and the average wage is $100,000 a year. And I think it's important to point out that they're not asking for any assistance from the state. So we'll take those kind of jobs all day, any day, if we can get hundreds of jobs with no financial commitment from the state at a rate of $100,000 a year. Along those lines, one thing that most people that are familiar with data centers would tell you is they cluster, and so you're likely to see other data centers come, and so certainly that is an opportunity. And then yes, we're looking at from our perspective, and I've heard folks here talk about this team's kind of the advanced manufacturing and energy and technology approach. Had them out of order, but at looking at companies that make and manufacture the equipment. Can they be located in close proximity? Or certainly if I could have started a turbine company years ago, obviously those are in high demand, and this for power generation. I think there are opportunities. That has not been my focus so much yet, again, but I do think that there's opportunity to attract some ancillary businesses in proximity to a data center.
Chris, as we move toward the end of the allocated time, um, is there anything else that you just would like to add based on any of the questions that have come up? Again, if we did not get to your question, we will provide an email for Chris so that he can help address your question. But anything you'd like to add? Kaylin does have an announcement about a sort of a follow-up, so we need to get to that. But please take some time and tell us if there's anything you wanted to add.
Not really. Other than just, I appreciate the fact that people are interested. I think this is a tremendous opportunity. I think that the when we look at trying to attract investment other than data center, I mean, if I'm trying to bring in a Fortune 500 company and I take them to our schools, are our schools measured up to other schools where these companies are looking? I mean, I think that there are places in the state that have. I think these could fit in a whole bunch of different scenarios. If you look at some of the challenges in southern West Virginia, you have a lot of opportunities there because there's certainly areas where there's power and there's a lot of land without some of the concerns about being right upon residential households. I think there's opportunities in the Eastern Panhandle where you have a strain on schools and you have a strain on roads, and you can locate a data center strategically that doesn't add additional strain to that infrastructure, yet generates revenue so that the counties can have more flexibility on other infrastructure needs or other ways to improve their community. So I think we can find places that these will fit and they'll fit well. And I do appreciate everyone's interest and for having me on here today.
Chris, I might have saved a challenging question for last, but again, I think we have a moment for this. Would it be fair to say that data centers are going to be built in this region and that we have some decisions to make in West Virginia as to whether we want them to be in West Virginia or whether we simply will watch them go to communities that may border West Virginia, but outside of our political boundaries and therefore outside of our ability to regulate or collect tax revenue from?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I could make the argument, and this is probably anecdotal more than anything, but I would say that we are probably already powering most of the data centers in Virginia. We are a net exporter of energy. They are an importer. And, I went to Loudoun County and I met with folks there, their county budget in Loudoun County attributable to data center investment was over $2 billion for their county. Our general revenue fund for the state's over $5 billion. You look at Ohio, there's been a lot of data center investment in and around the Columbus area. Pennsylvania's had some big announcements. They're gonna go, and they're gonna go places where they can have access to power, and we have the ability to do that. We're going to use them, as we talked about earlier today. I think it makes sense and it's wise to allow us to actually benefit from their use, and especially if we can do so in a manner that's responsible and that we work with folks to identify sites that work.
Chris, it's great to hear from a state leader who has your point of view, your level of experience, your responsibility, your thoughtfulness, and your view that as we move into this arena, we need to take our time and be thoughtful, but that there is real opportunity here if we choose to pick up on the opportunity that could be available. And that certainly is the point of view of the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce. So it's wonderful to get to hear from you, and thank you for taking the time to do this. Kaylin George has an announcement about a follow-up opportunity that we have for additional information from the US EPA. So, Galen?
Absolutely. And then I would just like to echo what Steve said. Chris, it's been a pleasure working with you, getting to know you, getting to know more about data centers and how they can fit here in West Virginia. So really appreciate it. And thank you for everyone who has attended and asked questions and participated in the process. This will be available on wvchamber.com as well as our social media sites for you to play back. And like Steve was saying, this is the first in many of our Business Academy series on exploring data centers. The next one will be with the US EPA. That's going to be Tuesday, February 17th at 2 p.m. And that is spearheaded by our Environmental and Energy Committee Chair, Kathy Beckett. Expert speakers from the EPA will dive deep into their latest initiatives, some federal resources, and the permitting process as we continue to explore this booming industry right now. So really appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you everyone for joining. This is going to be on our website and on social media. And again, we have saved all the questions. We'll give them to Chris and so he can answer them for you or get someone to answer them for you. And we appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks to all. And Chris, thank you very, very much. We appreciate you and the development office and the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.